Have you ever wanted to see every personality that your girlfriend has all at once? Well, of course, no one really actually wants that. We already saw that as an example with Split, but I've got the next best thing. And today we're talking about The Alters, a game that I've been fortunate enough to review. And to not waste any of your time, here is my base level thoughts. I love this game. It is the most fitting follow-up to Expedition 33 that I could have imagined. This is a great game. I 100% recommend it. Whether you value playtime, you're getting plenty of it. Whether you value quality of content, you are getting that. So in both of those aspects, I think you're getting a very good value for what this game is going to be. Now, with that being said, I have a lot of things to gush about and a few things to say that I wish could have been either improved or tweaked just a little bit. But at a base level, I recommend this game. Now sit back for the rest of the review. Do you ever make a choice in life and think about how differently life could have went? Whether you go to college or work as a laborer or even throw it all away to become an online creator. Cough, cough. Sometimes it's something as simple as choosing your friends and those you surround yourself with. To compare both versions of yourself in the ends of this chain of butterfly effect, you could see things being drastically different. The college student could marry himself to his specific field and never find true love, suffering from success. And the unskilled laborer could be in a far worse financial situation with the love of his life. Regardless of the exact outcomes in The Alters, you're able to do just that. As Jan Dolsky, not Jan as it may be seen, you are the sole survivor of a space mission looking for an elusive resource called rupidium. Jan is an engineer, so while he handily has the knowledge to build up the base and even establish pipelines for a steady stream of resources, there are still plenty of things that he cannot do, such as piloting the base initially, repairing equipment, and quite frankly being two places at once. So that's when things get interesting. That rupidium that I mentioned earlier has a unique function that allows us to do some truly CIA level shit and clone ourselves. But with the twist that we're actually going to be looking through a timeline of our life events, and there are different branching points, and that's where we choose to make different versions of ourselves. So when we create this new body, they all have their own memories, and up until that point of branching off, we have the same memories. So that comes really interesting when you try to comfort these guys throughout the course of the game. Sometimes you can bring up events that you both remember, and sometimes you can compare and contrast your differences. So the first one that we really needed to create, and this is very purposeful for the story, is the technician. It takes a few hours for him to kind of grow in the womb, which is a part of the ship. You're going to let him grow overnight, and there he is, hopped up on tranquilizers and all. And just like that, in a few paragraphs, I've explained the basic gameplay loop of The Alters. Collect resources, build up your base to accomplish an objective, and when you hit a roadblock in function or efficiency, you look towards growing a new altar. I truly love this game. I've played a few 11-bit published games up till this point, between the Thaumaturge, the Invincible, and Indica. I actually haven't made it to the Frostpunk series yet, I'm sorry. And two of these games, being the Invincible and Indica, fell short of being great for me, contrary to a very popular opinion. And while I will say that yes, these were just published by 11-bit, and this is actually being published and developed by 11-bit, the Invincible lost me as the mystery and therefore the story and the pacing fell off in the last third of the game. Indica, on the other hand, felt great until its abrupt ending that had me wishing for another hour or so of gameplay. I'm happy to report that The Alters rectified every issue I had with 11-bit publishing so far. The story is separated into an act structure, leaving clear, concise goals off of the start of each one, as well as a lot of secondary and tertiary plot lines. In no small part thanks to the existence of multiple versions of our protagonist, Jan. And this game really does feel a little bit like a circus or like a clown show. You know, of course, the clowns being all of Jan walking around, having their own mental struggles and, personalities and complexes. But also the fact that you are juggling. You're juggling resource management as well as time, because one aspect of this game I haven't mentioned yet is the reason that you are trying to move your base so much, outside of moving to the end goal of getting to an evacuation rendezvous point, is that on this planet, radiation is a major issue. Every night, towards the end of each day cycle, radiation gets a lot heavier. It's unsafe to be outside. There are also radiation storms that occur throughout the game, and that's when you really need to hunker down and protect your base and keep everything online while everything outside is too crazy. But on top of that, the number one scary end game level shit that's been trying to get you the whole time is the sun. You're trying to avoid the sun cycle because it will completely demolish and destroy your ship once it catches up. It's really interesting. Obviously, it's not like an Earth, day-night cycle. The sun's not coming and getting you just like that. Every day, at the start of every day, it'll say the sun is far away. The sun is far away. Well, eventually, if you take too long getting to your objectives, it'll say the sun comes nearer. It draws closer. And when it gets closer, that's when the radiation at night starts sooner. There are more anomalies across the world. We'll get into those in the gameplay section in just a minute. And resources do actually get more bountiful. And in that way, that's kind of like the little, nudge towards getting out of there at the one last time. But okay, I actually want to start with the gameplay because I feel like that's the part that's going to be the most cut and dry. I like this game or I don't like this game to a lot of people. I'm going to exclude talking about building altars throughout this section for the sake of I feel like they're more relevant for the story, which I'll talk about next. However, I do want to say that when it comes to each of these individual altars, they do have their own jobs that they excel at. By crafting the miner, he's actually able to get resources more efficiently, which is great for time management and getting as much done within a day's time as possible. There's also characters like the scientist, which are all but essential, because he is how you can actually research new equipment, whether it be for base upgrades or actually for a story component. And he's one that you're going to always want to keep, at your right hand at all times. But anyways, enough about those for now. The main draw of the gameplay loop within the game is time itself. Every day cycle is cut across so many hours, and what you're going to want to do throughout that day is you're going to want to explore in the area around your base. When you do so, you will find veins or deposits of certain resources, and you're going to actually need to use these pylon things to, target the exact spot where you should put your resource collection. And once you do that, you'll connect it to your main base, and once it's connected, it's online. So any of the altars that you've had up till this point throughout the day, you can assign them to certain shifts, and that's what their goal is for the day. So therefore, if I don't want to sit there and be the one that's mining these resources myself, I'll set the miner on the metal vein, for instance. And outside of the fact that you are juggling a bunch of different resources, that's the long and short of that. Yes, the more altars you have and the more veins there are that you need, you might have to switch around who's doing what at any given time. If you actually take part in this, it's really interesting. Time speeds up and, time actually passes much faster. So it's kind of like a fast forward feature. And this comes to my first criticism of the game. In a game that so much revolves around time, the only way that you can speed up time itself is by doing a task, whether you're crafting something at an ore vein or doing some manual task that takes time. That's the only time you can speed up the game. But if you're running around the environment and all of your other altars are, they're doing your crafting, you're building, it's super, super slow. And I get the idea is that when you're traveling around the world, you don't want time to pass too fast. I get that. But I do think there should be a control, an option, a button, whatever, to actually pass time if you want to do that. And whether it is just a speed up function, just like already accessible within the game, that's fine. It doesn't need to be like the Skyrim wait 2 hours thing. I don't want that. I just want to be able to have a button or a control somewhere that I can just pass time. Whether it's just a button on every pylon that I can stop at any moment, that's cool too. It doesn't matter. But with that being said, that's really, as far as the gameplay goes, my only major criticism. Sometimes when running around the open world, I found myself getting caught on some of the ground. The edges were a little jagged, and that felt a little off, but other than that, no big deal. Just started running around it. But as you're being slow in the open world, there are a few things that you can find. First off, there are collectibles. You can find different movies, songs, and even items that you can give to your altars to kind of increase their morale and their emotionality with you. And all of that's really cool. There's a social room where you can watch movies together. You can also play beer pong, which is really cool. And it's just these fun little things like that that make the altars so interesting. You can build a little park within your base that lets altars go and relax. But these weird things that are really interesting that you can do within your base aren't the only things that are weird. The only main enemy or antagonistic force outside of the base itself are what the game calls anomalies. And these come in a couple different forms. A lot of times it looks like a jellyfish or something that you would see within the water. That are these balls and things of radiation. And some of them are slow moving, they can target you and try to follow you around. Some of them are just big areas that you're going to have to walk through and they cause time dilation. Interestingly enough, the only thing within the game that does speed up time outside of you doing that, so sorry I mentioned that earlier. And there's a few others, some of them that kind of push out in waves and try to keep you away from a certain area. And all of these can kind of be defeated or stopped in the same way. And the way that you're going to be doing that is using a tool called the Illuminator. In doing so, you can kind of target the core of these, anomalies, and eventually through, kind of lighting them up, they're going to die. Now, the Illuminator has so many charges. These same energy charges you can use to climb some of the higher areas within the game world as well. And through upgrades, you can get more charges or use less charges per attack or climb, and things like that just make the game start to feel so much better in the late game when you would think it would start to become monotonous. Okay, now obviously, as we transition into the story, I want you to see the gameplay I'm showing you. Okay, obviously showing you the gameplay in the background here, I want to emphasize that the game's visual effects are really cool, if a bit sparse at times. The game environments, while they don't always, showcase like a wide variety, I feel like the idea of all fitting into that kind of rocky and volcanic looking theme, I think the game does a good job of differentiating its different areas, especially to the player when they're trying to learn the new area of each of the acts of the game. Obviously, the base itself looks really cool. I like the zoomed in view that you get as you're running through it, and then the zoomed out view of the overall base overview is also so awesome. That's another aspect of the game I really enjoyed, was the base building. You're all doing it within this ring. You can expand it as you get different microchip upgrades, which is also what expands how many altars you can have at any time. And the ability to kind of reshuffle and move around your base however you feel, kind of like Fallout Shelter. It's just as satisfying. You got to line up your elevators to match the floors and things like that, of course. And that's no problem at all. It's just really fun. It's satisfying. And, having that optimal route to kind of know your way along. Like for me personally, you can see in my gameplay, I have one long elevator that connects all the floors. And yeah, it just makes perfect sense. And really, if I had any complaints to throw towards the visual identity of the game, it is the lip syncing. Something I've complained about a lot in games that kind of hover around that indie to AA to not ever quite AAA standard. It's the only thing with this level of game that ever really throws me out of my immersion. It's just that sometimes you're getting an insane voice performance, and you're going to get those within this game. The voice acting just never matches up with the character model, and that's the only thing I'll say. Now, speaking of voice for a second, I really believe that this game has stellar voice performances. Whether it be Doug Cockle, aka Geralt of fucking Rivia, as one of the characters you're talking to on the radio, or the guy who's doing Yawn, because I assume he's doing every version of Yawn within the game, putting in different inflections, different characteristics, different personalities into each of these different characters. Essentially, they are all different characters. I believe that whoever that voice actor is on the same level of any character in Expedition 33, a game that I absolutely love the voice cast for. And the only reason I don't think he'll be acknowledged as such an insane talent is because of the character models not lining up with the voices. I don't think the character models look bad. I think the character models look great. It's just the animations on those lips. It's just not quite on that same quality, but it's in-game and not in cutscene. You don't get that as much in this. Okay, one thing I wanted to talk about that I really loved in this game is the sound design. On one hand, you have the soundtrack, which is like a synthwave mix that perfectly illustrates the dire nature upon the mission you're in, as well as kind of the wonder of this situation, this new blossoming life that you were essentially creating for the first time ever. It really gets me when, the night is coming and you're going to have to make that quick run back to the base before the nighttime radiation truly kicks in. The sound design isn't just the soundtrack, however. I will say something, not every song or track within the game always makes me feel crazy. Not every one of them is sticking out to me, say, like in Expedition 33. That being said, though, the actual sound effects within the game do really good to help the gameplay experience. Whether it's little voice cues from the characters saying, hey, I need to talk to you, which kind of clues in that you can have a conversation and continue a quest line, or the actual sound effects of a bass module breaking down, or even the audio distortion as you get closer and even enter into the anomalies, does an excellent job in immersing me in what are at times very perilous situations. Overall, I think the audio to the game was really good, and when standing it up to the quality of the storytelling, the gameplay, and the visuals, I think it knocks it pretty much out of the park. But I really just wanted to use that moment to emphasize that the voice acting in this game, whether it be other characters, Lena, your ex-wife or wife or whoever, depending on which altar you ask, they may say different things on that. Haha. And with that being said, with that little intrigue into the story, let's talk about it. The altars is split into 3 major acts, as I've already said. And as I've already aptly kind of compared it to, each of these acts are a part of a circus. In each of them, they have major story beats. Obviously, the overarching story beat is to get to the end game rendezvous point. Each of these acts adds something so amazing from a story standpoint that it genuinely feels like I'm playing a trilogy of movies. Like these sci-fi movies, like, I don't know how to say it. Like each of these acts could be its own movie, and if this is a trilogy, man, I'm going day one to the theater every time. You know, in Act 2, there is like this weird medical problem that arises, and the way that you deal with that problem, there's a major choice within the end of the Act 2 that has insane repercussions going into Act 3 that by the time I hit Act 3, I didn't want to stop playing the game ever. And in that way, I guess going into Act 3, it was a bit of a drag getting going again, but I feel like that was just as much part of the story as well for Jan, so it was tonally correct in that way. But I really don't want to spoil what happens. I do, however, want to give you a few examples of some of the character moments that you can have within the game. Every altar that you create has a side story that you can follow up on. One of the instances that I will give is the miner. Someone whose story I am going to slightly spoil into Act 2, but for the most part, most of the gameplay I'm showing is going to be in Act 1. And these are just going to be mostly through conversations. But the miner is a character who, in his previous life before you grafted him, although it's all a theoretical, alternate version, alternate universe, the miner has lost his arm in an accident, and because of that, he views himself as a lesser human being. Well, when he is reborn, he's born in your body, so he has a new arm. He complains again and again about how it's not his arm, it doesn't feel right to him. So in doing so, in all of these complainings, he's asking for pain medicine, some of the tranquilizers that he was born with, and different ways to kind of numb that pain. Obviously, to me, I'm thinking, I don't want a drug addict on board, maybe messing up, causing workplace accidents, things like that, because this game gets like that. Like, it's crazy. The decisions you make, they have real consequences. And so therefore, when I denied him both times that he asked me 2 days in a row, not only did he work a lesser shift when, altars are mad, they don't work as long as if they're happy. Not only did he do that for 2 days, on the third day, I get a notification. Jan Miner hurt himself in the kitchen. Well, he cut his arm off. And obviously, I had to create an infirmary unit just for him to go and heal so he didn't die, because if a character is hurt so badly, they can die within this game. I never actually had it happen in that way. But you need to be able to care for these altars' needs. They're kind of like your family in a lot of ways, and I gotta say, it feels like that. The ups and the downs, the arguments and the agreements, they really make each of these characters feel like family. I care for every one of the altars I had. There was never one that I truly disliked. And when I hated them, and there were moments where I hated some of them, it really felt like family in a weird kind of way. I don't know, it's weird. It's really weird like that. But anyways, once he was healed up enough to where he was no longer at the threat of dying, the situation came up, well, he can't work with one arm. So the scientist said, well, I can figure out how we can get him a prosthetic arm. But the technician, the first one that I ever created, he was like, listen, that's not the point of the problem. The point is he never felt like it was his arm. You could probably use some rubidium and regrow him his arm. That way it'll actually feel like his from the jump, and maybe he'll feel a little more like you care about him. So I actually went and did the harder option. It was going to take longer to research what we needed to regrow the arm and actually get it grown, and therefore I did it. I mean, it took time, but the miner, it was to set him on the right track, and it was the right thing to do, but I just as easily could have taken the quick option and gotten him back to work sooner with the mechanical arm. But at the end of the day, given where his plotline goes in Act 2, which I guess I'm not spoiling. I didn't spoil that. That was Act 1. But mental health is a big part of the miner's storyline, and that's how I feel about each of these characters. And for as in-depth as that storyline sounds, that's one act of his story. Act 2 gets even crazier, and every altar in some way has their own little story that you can follow up on. You've got to take time to do it, so you need to allocate proper time. Talking and dealing with the altars is a constant struggle. It really feels like you have all the stoves going to cook the meal in the kitchen all at once. Sometimes altars directly oppose one another, where you are kind of inclined to pick a side or you're going to stay out of it. Sometimes they'll simply give you two alternatives like the one I mentioned with the arm, where you can only truly make one of them happy. And even in individual conversations, the way you reply to them shapes how they feel. You'll get these little red and green pop-ups as they talk, keying you into how they respond to your tone and messaging to them. And an interesting thing to note, whether you're talking to the scientist who's a little more by the books, more caring about the mission, or say the botanist who is more in touch with caring about Lena, the wife, because in his lifetime, he actually married her and stayed happily together. And so you kind of have to take the time to root out what each of them actually cares about, and in that way you're going to optimize how you can actually deal with them. And keeping your alters happy, fed, and safe is paramount to maintaining those full work days that are going to get you all home safely. And that's where my final criticism of the game comes in. This one almost felt more like a bug than anything, but at the end of Act 2, there is a time-relevant part of the game where at the end of the act, all of the alters convene in the kitchen for a meeting to decide something. It's very important. But throughout the course of that meeting, they're going to be in there for that day. However, you can still get stuff done before going to that meeting and actually making this huge final decision, the one that ends the chapter. But in doing so, I was actually able to finish up the miner's Act 2 storyline, but because he was already in the kitchen, I was unable to go to him to kind of turn in the quest and finish his arc out. So therefore, I had to reload my save and completely finish his storyline a whole day early, or at least earlier than I had planned to, because of this issue. So therefore, basically because everyone their character models had to be in the kitchen waiting for me to start the meeting, it just didn't work out that way. I could assign them to go do their other jobs and it shows them doing it on my screen, but they never actually leave the kitchen. So what I would have rathered in this chapter, if anybody's watching from the dev team for whatever reason, I would have much rather it be a situation where I go to the kitchen by myself and kind of call them in to convene the meeting. Or at the bare minimum, allow me to talk to people individually in the kitchen before starting the meeting. It really kind of screwed me over a little bit, although it did kind of give me a chance to see how reloading the saves worked within the game. And I think making it to where every day is a new autosave works exceptionally well. Just it saves every time you sleep and go into the next day. I think that works great. But with that being said, I had a bunch of major talking points I wanted to talk about within this video. I knew which character I wanted to focus on to kind of give the emotional depth of the story. And I feel like outside of rambling just a little bit, I'm going to try to cut that down. But I feel like I've done an exceptional job of showing the few things I didn't like, but the many things that the game does really, really well. And that combined with my gameplay here, I think you should see that the game looks great. Obviously the audio presentation is good. The soundtrack, it's a little subdued sometimes, but when it hits, it really hits. It's got that perfect sci-fi tone to it that I really, really love. But with that being said, my name is fallinghurts. Thank you for watching this video. If you like the game, consider subscribing. I like to try to do more of these day one reviews like this. And yeah, thank you to everyone, and goodbye.
Seems now anything could be undone. Would you be really missing things if they were never truly